Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. Welcome to the eighth episode of the FPL Wire powered by DreamSetGo. I'm your host, Zoph, and I'm joined as always by my co host, Late Riser. Looks like Halloween came a weekend early, LR. Scary weekend.
Oh yeah, it was a game week where nothing really happened. I actually don't mind such game weeks because you're not really gaining or losing much ground on your rivals. I thought there was a little bit of overreaction on Twitter in terms of what happened this weekend, but unless you had a differential in terms of a Bamford or a Zaha, not much damage is done. I'm hoping, especially not to butcher any names on this podcast. Liverpool looked a little leaky without Van Dijk. I just wanted to get out of the way. My team did all right. I got about 35 points. Only Jimenez and Foden brought in the points. Outside of that, not much happened. Our friend Bakar, he scored 39 points. He's sitting at 1.5 million. Son and Saiz brought the points for him. How about your week? How was it, Zoph?
46 after the 4 point hit, which is, I think, about average, down to 800k from 700k. But enough about me. We also have our first guest on today, FPL veteran Tom Freeman. Tom has been playing for 11 seasons now, finishing in the top 1k 5 times, and currently sits at a lofty 140k OR. How was your game week, Tom?
Yeah, it's a good week to come on. 70 points.
Wow.
Started well on Friday night. Bamford and Ayling both did the business. Saturday was a bit quieter, a little bit unlucky with the Salah captaincy call. But yeah, a good Sunday. Got a couple of clean sheets via McCarthy and Justin. And Jimenez did well. And then last night with Son and Kane coming through. So yeah, it was a really good week and a decent start. So.
That's great. So we'll get more into Tom's FPL strategy later on. But before that, a quick word about our sponsors. DreamSetGo is a global portal for fans to gain access to sporting events around the world. Accommodation, flight tickets, hospitality, stadium visits, everything can be tailored exactly to your requirements. They also do celebrity experiences, which include masterclasses with your favorite sports celebrity or something as simple as birthday shoutouts. Visit dreamsetgo.co for more. The FPL Wire is a part of the Fantasy Scout Network, and all stats used in the podcast are taken from the FFS members area. Please sign up if you haven't already.
And the agenda for today, so far is going to do a short interview with Tom. He's got a fabulous history, 8 top 10K finishes in his 11 seasons. So we're going to be knowing more about his strategy. The hot topics for this week are what to do with Everton assets, especially now that they don't have Dean or Richarlison. What to do with Man City assets. We'll be doing a little section on mid-price midfielders. The teams we'll be looking at closely are Chelsea, Aston Villa, and Southampton. After that, we have the hot fixtures, differentials, Bakar stats, our teams, Q&A. So Zoph, why don't you start with asking Tom why and how he's done so amazingly well in the past?
Let's kick off. So as mentioned earlier, Tom has a stellar FPL track record. He's finished in the top 10k in 8 out of his 11 seasons and in the top 1k 5 times. In a season where many FPL veterans are struggling, he's sitting at 140k. He's a Villa fan and one of the most helpful guys in this community. So in this section, we speak to Tom about what makes him such a good, consistent FPL player. So to start with, Tom, what are your 3 factors that you put down your FPL success to?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a hard one to sum up, but I think one of the things which I normally have is a plan. And I try to kind of visualize my team, 2 or 3 weeks down the line. I'm not saying look too far ahead here, but kind of have a plan on what you want to do. You want to be looking at fixture swings. You want to be looking at things like captaincy and who you want in your team for that. And I'm quite wary that plans do often have to be ripped up at the last minute sometimes with injuries. We're living in a pandemic at the moment, but I think it's always good to have an idea of what your moves are going to be 2-3 weeks down the line. And it helps in terms of, just you shouldn't need to be taking points hits as often if you feel you've got an idea of where you want your team to be. So, I think having a plan is definitely kind of something to bear in mind. I'd also say another reason is kind of play your own game. There's a lot of noise in the community, as you guys know. You're both heavily active on Twitter, and I always think it's good to get input from players that you respect. But don't be, take your own direction. Player like Bamford is a really good example, because, you go on Twitter in kind of pre-season and all the talk of him is he scored 16 goals last year. I think his XG was something like 24. And so you're talking about a player who kind of missed a lot of chances last year. And maybe the narrative on Twitter and the community is that don't go near this player. But if you believe in that player, be strong-minded and treat players with a bit of a clean slate. And if you believe in it, go for it, I think. And that applies to players like Barkley, and things like that as well. People look at his past history and possibly get put off by it. But moving to a new club where he's going to be playing week in, week out, I think you maybe need to put those preconceived ideas maybe to one side. I don't know if you guys agree with that.
Completely
agree with that. I actually tweeted about this because I was bigging up Barkley as a pick, and everybody's like, oh, it's a trap. It's a new season and he's playing for a team consistently. If you're going to compare Barkley now, you need to compare him to his season at Everton, and which looked pretty convincing. So yeah, definitely agree.
Yeah, when he's a week in, week out starter for sure. And players like Theo Walcott as well, who I've got a bit of history with, but he's moved to a new club now, and I'm certainly not thinking of bringing him in right now. But just because I've had past experiences with the player, which probably haven't gone as well as I would have hoped at the time, don't rule him out completely. There may be a time when he could be a useful pick. So yeah, kind of play in your own game. And kind of like the final point is just put in the time, watch games, look at the right stats, read about, I don't know about you guys, but I've got a subscription to The Athletic and things like that, and just immerse yourself in it. And I don't think there's no kind of shortcuts in this game. You're not going to help yourself by jumping on a Friday half an hour before deadline and just randomly kind of chucking in players. You've got to put in the time and to do well at this game, I think. And watch as much football as you possibly can. So.
Yep, it's almost an avalanche nowadays, isn't it? With 10 games back to back, it's almost 900 minutes of football. So I think at this point, I'm probably watching too much football, if anything. So you mentioned stats, Tom. Which particular stats do you adhere? Like, do you really go by? Are there any 2 or 3 stats you look at in particular?
I look at expected data a lot because I think I've kind of touched on it before that. There's so many stats that you can get, and I think the expected data kind of rounds it up nicely. That's not to say that's all I look at. I spend a lot of time in the members area looking at, everything from heat maps to touch maps to shots in the box. There's a load of stats, but I think if you're limited for time, the expected data is kind of a good place to kind of start.
I like non-penalty XG myself. I'm a big fan of that stat in particular.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. What's your process like, Tom? On a Monday, once the football is done with, what happens in your head when you're coming around to making a transfer?
Well, I tend to kind of on a Monday or on a Tuesday, if the games are running until Monday, I've got a little custom table in the Scout members area, which just kind of is a really quick kind of look at all the important stats, shots in the box, chances created, XG, that kind of thing. And it's just a really quick kind of deep dive in. You can just spend 15, 20 minutes in there.
For the game week? For that particular game week?
Yeah, exactly. And it just kind of, little things will jump out of you. And then as the week progresses, you can delve into that data more and have a look at that, and see what kind of takes your interest. And if you can start to notice any trends, really, I suppose. So, and then you guys know I make transfers later in the week. I tend to let European games run their course, domestic cup competitions. And then by the end of the week, by a Friday, I always feel more comfortable in making a decision at that point. And that's not to say that will work for everybody, but that's what works for me.
So you're not that big on team value. I think I get messages from everyone saying that this X and Y is going to go up today. I need to buy him, etc., etc.
No. I think good decisions will enable your team value to grow naturally. I've never let, just because a player's going down on a Tuesday, if I'm not ready to make a move, then that wouldn't that wouldn't make me kind of go through and make the decision earlier. If I'm not ready, I'm not ready. And if it means losing 0.1, 0.2, then so be it. That's not a big thing for me. So,
what if it's zero movement, zero room in the bank to make that move? Would you push the trigger then?
Yeah. I think if you're in a circumstance like that, and sometimes that's not a blanket rule that I have. I think earlier this season I moved out Aubameyang for De Bruyne. Like loads of people made that move in game week 3, and I watched the game on the Monday night. I knew it was the move, so I made it then. But normally my decision making, I'm not ready to make a move normally on a Monday. It takes me that kind of bit longer to do it.
That makes sense. Any other particular rules you adhere to? Any particular principles?
None really. I think you guys have spoken before. You need to be quite flexible. I think I don't really like having rules or anything like that because there's stuff like never captain. I don't think I've ever captained a defender, but I wouldn't say it's a rule because there were times last year when I was looking at Trent Alexander-Arnold's numbers, and you kind of think at that point, it at least it comes into your thought process. But I don't really like having too many rules or anything like that, guys. No.
Makes sense. So when you're making a transfer, what is your thought process? Who do you evaluate, who to sell and who to buy?
Again, that's a good one. There's been a lot of talk in the community about kind of identifying the weak link in your team, hasn't there? And I think that's always a good way of doing it. But my weak link has been Vinagre from Wolves for a few weeks now, but he's been kind of pushed to one side, and I don't really think that's a priority transfer right now. So I've been more focusing on, I haven't played a Wildcard, so I've been wanting to get in players like Kane and Son and Jimenez, and that's where my transfers have been focused. So again, I don't think there's any kind of rules or anything like that with it. It's just what feels right for my team at any given point.
So where do you stand on form versus fixtures? Now, when you look at bringing in a player, do you place a greater emphasis on form or do you look at fixtures? And if fixtures, how many fixtures? 4, 6, 8?
I'm fixtures. I'm always fixtures, to be honest. That's the way I play. I do think it's worth noting though, when you're looking at teams at the bottom of the table, they don't really have good fixtures, even though it looks like good fixtures. So bear that in mind when we're looking at Fulham, and I think they play Palace and they've got West Brom next, and they're good fixtures on paper, but they're not really easy games for Fulham as we saw. So I think you have to bear that in mind with when you get to the top of the league. Then fixtures become more apparent, I suppose, for me. But I am a kind of fixtures guy. I tend to look in 4 to 6 kind of weeks. I don't look too far ahead. No.
Yeah, but about that. 4 to 6.
Does that change for you when you're looking at defenders or attackers?
Yeah, possibly, because I know you don't want to be making defensive moves, but a lot can happen in 4 to 6 weeks, especially this season. So I'm trying not to look in huge chunks of fixtures because I don't. About 6 weeks is what I'm kind of looking at the moment. But that's because I've got a wild card in my back pocket as well. So that maybe gives you a little bit more insurance as well with that. So
correct. That makes sense. So now I think Salah was your first captain blank this week.
Yeah.
So what is your thought process when picking captains? Like this week, for example, is a very difficult choice between Salah and Kane. Which way would you lean and why?
My captain process this season has been Captain Salah. It's been I think he's been 5 out of 6, and he'll be my captain again this weekend. I find it very hard to back against him this season. I think he was unlucky on Saturday. I think he was pretty close to a haul, and I feel confident putting the armband on him again. Spurs have looked great recently, but there's not enough convincing me to go for a Kane or a Son just yet. It'll be Salah again. So if anything, I've made the captaincy quite easy. Easy decision this year so far.
So it seems like more of a case of you back the player rather than the fixture. Would you say that?
Yeah, possibly. To an extent, but I think Salah's had some good home fixtures. I captained him away at Villa this year, and Yeah. There possibly is an element of that. I mean, Salah looks hungry. He's even against Everton, he had limited opportunities, but he found a way through. And I just think that game at the weekend, it was just one of those days, wasn't it? I think a lot of us were in the same boat with the captaincy.
Yeah. Do you usually punt on these lower owned players, let's say like a Mopai or somebody like that who has a one-off good fixture at any time?
Sorry, so if you just cut out then, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I was just asking, do you punt on any of these like guys from the smaller teams if they have a good fixture? Like in the previous years, we had Charlie Austin, who was maybe a captain option at home. Or do you prefer these big teams?
Yeah, I trust the bigger teams more, and that's where I'd rather put the captaincy. I think sometimes having in those kind of players from the smaller teams is probably enough. And there's a reason why that they're probably near the bottom of the table, is that they're naturally a bit more inconsistent. So I would rather keep it onto those kind of top 6 kind of clubs, if I can.
Right. So have you made any changes to your game this season? Seems a bit more difficult. What has worked for you this season?
I think I made a few mistakes last year, and I think it was quite an unusual season for me because I started to write a lot for Fantasy Football Scout. And I think that comes with its own challenges. You guys will know this, that when you're writing regular articles, I think you're kind of, you wanting to come up with new names, you wanted to make your articles interesting. And I sometimes felt like I wanted to back those punts. So I would end up with players like Buendia in my team, or Walcott was in my team for 3 weeks. And now I'm kind of looking back, I kind of analysed my season last year, and was it the most efficient use of my transfers? Maybe not. So I think that's something which I've tried to try and learn from, I suppose. And chip strategy let me down big time last year. I think I free hitted in game week 30. I bench boosted for about 10 points, and I'm pretty sure had I gone with the more regular chip strategy, I think I would have easily had another top 10k, probably a lot higher than that. So I need to look at that and be a bit more careful with the way I do things this year with chip strategy. And maybe captaincy, like going back to that Salah point, maybe I'm just keeping it a bit more simple now.
So what do you do about Man City assets? I know my friend Pranil here, he likes Man City assets a lot. He likes captaining Sterling. But for me, I find the security of starts, the explosive, is very unpredictable. It's always, it's a 20-point haul or you have a 1 or 2. What do you think about City players in general as for captaincy options?
Well, I quite like playing the kind of pet roulette game. You can, it's predicting who's going to start. I find it quite a fun kind of aspect of the game. So yeah, if I thought, Pranil's had amazing success by going with Aguero last year and Sterling post lockdown kind of thing. So I think there's an art to it, if you know what I mean. And I think we can get ahead of the average FPL player who probably doesn't do as much research as maybe some of us guys do in terms of looking at European minutes and opposition tactics and things like that. So I wouldn't be against it at all. And I'm sure there will be a time when their fixtures turn, I think in a few weeks' time in around 10, where I'll be looking at that in more detail.
So are you a Sterling man or a KDB man?
Both, I think, really. Maybe De Bruyne gives you that bit more security with penalties, but if it wouldn't have been, if he's not on penalties, then I would be tempted to side towards Sterling, I think.
Because the problem I always had with De Bruyne, I owned him for 36 weeks last season, and I think I captained him once. You don't feel that secure about a haul coming with De Bruyne, right? He's the kind who'll trickle along with 7-9 points every week, but you never really feel that confident in captaining him.
Yeah, I didn't have him for a long time last year. I didn't start with him. I went through a spell with him, and then I sold him for Son and Bruno Fernandes when he first came to United. So I went for long spells without him. I certainly don't think he was the kind of player that I had to have in the team. But when he picked up those penalties, I felt kind of worried going without him, if you know what I mean.
Exactly.
So far, I never really asked you, did you captain Sterling at any point last season?
Is that a trick question?
Yeah, I remember pod 1 now. Yeah. It was emotional with Sterling for you. I remember.
It was very emotional.
Yeah.
I'm still sad by it. So what made you go heavy on Leeds, Tom? Like you said, you were able to block out the noise. Did you watch them a lot in the championship last season?
Not as much last season, but the season before, because Villa were in the Championship, I watched a heck of a lot of them, and they were the best team in the league that season, and they were unfortunate. I think they got knocked out by Derby in the playoffs. But I think, you can kind of tell when a team is coming up from the Championship, you can tell how good they're going to be and how good they can adapt. And it's normally system teams like Wolves and Sheffield United who you can tell that they're going to adapt. And I think with Leeds, they'd had an FA Cup game earlier this year against Arsenal when for 45 minutes they'd just been absolutely superb. And I think when you've got a coach as good as Bielsa, I think, I have no kind of qualms backing a couple of their players. You get such value in the newly promoted teams. And so, I went in with Ayling and Bamford. I like the fact they played Liverpool in game week 1. I think that was a good little decoy because it put people off them. But for me, it was all about game week 2 when they played Fulham. And I always had that fixture in mind. I thought they would win that game. And that was kind of my reason for it. I've got to be honest, I probably didn't think I'd still have Bamford at this point when I picked my game week 1 team. But he's been ticking along quite nicely and made it kind of difficult to sell.
Do you think watching Leeds a couple of seasons ago helped you in that decision, or you generally focus on, when you're reading about the team, when you're doing your research, you focus on this system?
I think it helps having seen them, definitely. And I think with the Bamford pick, I did watch him a little bit after lockdown, and there was a few games, I think like 4 or 5 games after lockdown, when he looked like he was playing with more confidence. And I think the narrative with Bamford is that he's never scored goals, and that's not really true. You go back a few years to one of his loan spells, and he scored about 25 goals, I think. He had a season with Middlesbrough when he scored 19. So I think maybe there was a lot of emphasis put on, last season with Bamford, but his XG number suggests he was getting into the right places, and I value that in a striker, maybe more than finishing ability. There's players like Gabby Jesus who's constantly posting good XG numbers because he's getting into good positions, and you will find there will be periods when finishing can be streaky, and there will be periods where he hits a hot run kind of thing, and he does find the back of the net. So there was kind of that, and that was my kind of reason for picking him. But as well, I think when you watch the Championship, there's a lot of packed boxes because Leeds are a good team in that division. A lot of teams are playing deeper, getting men behind the ball. Coming up to the Premier League is going to be completely different for a player like Bamford, because there's going to be more space to it, and teams are naturally going to attack a newly promoted team. So Bamford, whereas a lot of crosses were going into the box last year, maybe he's going to have a different type of chance this year, which he can thrive in. So it's not a like for like comparison playing in the Premier League to the Championship.
I love that you say that, because you mentioned about putting in the hours in the game, but you're not really taking the data or the research that you're doing face value. You're trying to use that data to figure out or try to assume or try to predict how these teams are going to play in the future. And that's something I don't see a lot of FPL managers doing. They just say that, okay, Kane and Son scored goals, so they're going to continue going to score goals. But I see you putting a lot more thought in terms of predicting the results of teams. So I quite enjoy that. It's a fascinating listen.
Yeah, I think, and it's Bamford's thriving, isn't he? And it helps as well having a coach who really believes in you. Bielsa, clearly, he's his main man. Rodrigo came in. There was a lot of noise around him taking his place. But, I think it can take time for people to transition into Bielsa's system. Bamford's just been thriving, and he's not going to get dropped anytime soon. So...
Yep. So one last question. This is from Flapjack on Twitter. He wants to know whether you're still doing the attacker punt in midfield, which you had mentioned on the Meet the Manager episode.
Well, I started off with Pulisic in game week 1, who was a differential. Now, that didn't quite go to plan. So I switched him for James, who at the time wasn't a differential, but he wasn't massively owned. I think he was probably about 10% around that. So I guess I was then, but since then I've just had other fires I've had to put out, to be honest. So, it's a strategy I like. I will do it again, but I'm not going to do it just for the sake of doing it. I've had to focus transfers on getting De Bruyne in, Jimenez in, Son in, Kane in, and at the moment I haven't. But I mean, we'll touch upon it later, but I've got my eye on Bowen, Jared Bowen from West Ham, so maybe then it will come into effect a little bit more. But as you guys know, it's a strategy I love.
Mm-hmm. Or until Wildcard scores his first goal.
I could be tempted. Never again.
All right. Thanks a lot for that, Tom. Let's now jump into the hot topics.
All right. First, we'll be talking about Everton, and they lost two of their key players to red cards, Luca Dean and Richarlison. Now we saw that they didn't look as effective this game week. Now, do you expect that to continue? I mean, Saints are a tough opposition, and a lot of people have asked questions in terms of what to do with their Everton assets, namely Calvert-Lewin and James. What's your thinking there, Tom?
I think I would remain level-headed with those guys. I think that this is 1 week. I think they were missing players. Richarlison was out at the weekend. The Didney sending off. I think you give them more time. And the problem is with removing these players now is that they play Fulham in game week 9. So you take them out now, you're going to want them back in again in a couple of weeks. And I think that it'll be interesting to see what they do with Digne being out, because they've got the young guy on Cuckoo who I hear, I don't know enough about the guy, but I'm hearing that he's quite a prospect. You've got Delph who could play at left back, but I think with an issue with putting Delph at left back, if they've got Godfrey at right back, I think that's going to really kind of blunt their kind of attacking. I think so. That's going to be kind of interesting, but James is a class player, and it's a definite hold for me. And let's have a look how they get on against a Newcastle team, which haven't looked great at home against United, especially. So.
Yeah, I agree totally with you. I think if James' injury is something serious, then I would probably even be thinking of abandoning DCL, who, by the way, I noticed you don't have in your team. You haven't had DCL all season, right?
No, I haven't had him. I've wanted him to get it in, but again, I've had other kind of fires to put out, and so I think he will be in my team at some point, but probably in a couple of weeks. I've got Jimenez, who after this week his fixtures kind of turn a little bit, so that's an obvious kind of move I could make, or possibly to Antonio. But Calvert-Lewin, I would imagine it's going to be a matter of time before he is in the team. You guys both own him, right?
Yep. Yeah, I own him since game week. One of the few good calls I've made this season.
I think Ella had them.
That's a great call.
So I'll just walk through the table I've got up over here now. Everton were restricted, I think, to just 3 shots in the box by Southampton that game. So I think it's a lot is down to Southampton's defense also. I think Southampton's defense is very underrated. They're a very good team. They were all over Everton. They didn't let them play. And I think Everton really missed Richarlison. They didn't have anyone who was making the run behind the line, like as Son was making, Werner was making. So I think that was something they really missed. So
there does seem to be a drop off in quality, doesn't there? With Sigurdsson and Iwobi aren't quite making that impact that you want them to. You want them to be coming into the team and saying, "I deserve to be in it," and it's just not really happening.
It's not happening at all. Anything you have to add, Ella, on this?
Yeah, I just want to wait and watch. I'm with you guys. I think the fixtures are still there for Everton to trickle through and see the next 2 or 3 games out without these 2 assets, and I'd urge patience if you have other fires in your team. I'd just like to add one thing. Ancelotti did mention in his post-match interview that he's looking to appeal, so I don't know what's happening there. So if at all you're looking to remove Dean, I'd wait for Friday, because they might appeal the red cards.
I think we'll know by Wednesday. Usually these things are decided like well before the Thursday, Friday. I think we'll know.
Yep. So just for our trigger happy friends, I'd say just wait.
But he's going down in price. But if he's okay, so let's move on to the next topic, Manchester City. Why don't you kick us off in this one, LR? What do you think?
So there's been a lot of talk about Manchester City, and they just haven't looked the same this season, which I agree has happened. I mean, their average XG per game has gone down from 2.48 last season to 1.24. That said, I thought in the second half against West Ham, when Foden and De Bruyne came on for Bernardo Silva and Gundogan, I think that game changed. They looked a lot sharper. Aguero was pretty ineffective in the first half, and it showed that he was struggling with some sort of niggle. And City looked a much better team in the second half. So when it comes to players like Raheem Sterling, I'm looking to hold him. I'm even considering captaining him this weekend because I feel like Man City are on the verge of explosion. If you look at the last 20 minutes of that game when City were chasing a goal against West Ham, they created a lot of good chances. I mean, Sterling was on goal twice. I just thought he looked tired, which is why he didn't finish them. I expect him to normally finish such chances. And there were a couple of overhead through balls which De Bruyne played to Cancelo and Mahrez beyond the defense, and all that was needed was them to cross the ball in. And Sterling, who normally had an issue with his positioning in the first few games, he was waiting there right in the center of the box, waiting to tap that in if that ball was crossed in correctly. So I feel like they're on the verge of getting their act together. Foden impressed me. He's looking really good. In fact, he's showing the most eye-catching statistics amongst the City midfielders and kind of flying under the radar as a value pick. He's played most of the minutes as well. And based on that performance against West Ham, I still expect him to play maybe 3 out of 4 games. And right now, City are scoring a goal against teams. I expect that to change. I expect them to score 2, 3, 4 goals against teams very soon. So I'd urge patience. I mean, and then there's a lot of talk about the Liverpool, about City fixtures still being difficult. I think Liverpool defense is there for the taking. I thought they looked fairly loose against Sheffield United as well. So I wouldn't worry too much about the fixtures. Be patient with your City assets. De Bruyne's back as well. So that's a big deal.
Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Pranil said there. I think just having no fit strikers has had a big effect. I think the lack of David Silva as well has been huge for them, especially with Bruyne out. As soon as you take both of them out at that time, the dynamic immediately changes. I think having no Laporte in their whole build-up play hasn't helped either. I think he's back for the UCL game. They did score 3 past Porto last week, so they're still scoring, not to the levels that we've had in previous seasons. But again, yeah, I definitely wouldn't be looking to hold them on. I think we'll touch on it later, but Foden is probably in the top 3 mid-price midfielders you can own right now. So.
Any interest in Cancelo? I mean, I was just reading a tweet from a friend. He looked very attacking. He was providing all the width on that left-hand side. And AA33, a friend of the pod, he mentioned that the last 8 games that he's available for Man City, he started. So it might be time to start taking him seriously for 5.4 million. That's a good price.
Last week, I did the scout squad for Scout, and I put him in that because West Ham, if you look at where they're conceding their chances, the vast majority come from the right hand side, where they're giving up those chances. I thought Cancelo against Arsenal, who played on the right, and he had that kind of role where he'd kind of come in field. It was really interesting, but that was very specific to Arsenal, and I expected him to move to the left for that game. And yeah, I think he could be quite a shrewd pick, Cancelo. But I expect him to carry on the left back position as well. I think he's first choice there.
The only worry is I saw Zinchenko come on as a substitute, and we know that. That's the worry.
Yeah. There's always that worry, isn't there? I suppose with dropping out. I mean,
if you had to go for one of Ruben Dias or Cancelo, which one would you pick? You'd take the gamble?
Cancelo, yeah. Definitely.
Anything to add to the City conversations?
I sort of disagree with you guys in terms of holding City assets. So I'll just share some stats for the last 4 game weeks. So last 4 game weeks, they've taken 36 shots in the box. That's ranked 6th. 18 shots on target. That's ranked 9th. 6 big chances. That's ranked 11th. Now, these are not numbers you expect from Manchester City. They're always, if not at the top, at least in the top 3. Now, in none of these games have they managed an XG of greater than 2. So there's something fundamentally broken there. I think it's a time now, let's say now you say, if you already have Son, you hold on to Sterling. But like in your team, Pranil, I'm quite surprised you're holding on to Sterling when you don't have Son, for example, because I think Son right now is the superior asset to Sterling.
I didn't think that was the case this game week. I mean, if you think about what went down last game week, Son wasn't involved at all against Burnley. Burnley, in fact, outplayed Spurs. And I just happen to trust Manchester City more than I happen to trust Spurs at the moment because I think there's more quality in that team. Sterling was through on goal 2 times. He was there in the box for a tap in twice. I understand that Son is offering a lot more value given his price, but I feel like Sterling is still a premium big hitter, and that hasn't changed. I feel like he's on the verge of an explosion.
I don't think he's worth his price right now, to be honest. I think maybe in another 2-3 weeks, maybe when the fixtures get easier, they kick on. But I think right now he's not worth 11.5.
Fair.
He was close to a haul though, wasn't he?
He was.
Yeah.
One of those goes in. People aren't looking at that; they're looking at the past. He delivered previously to that, hadn't he?
If one of those goes in, Sterling scored 3 goals in 3 games. That's earning his price.
Yeah.
Right, but at the same time, look at his underlying numbers. His underlying numbers, I would say, even if he scored 3 goals, if he scored those from 4 shots, because it's Raheem Sterling, I'd say it's unsustainable.
Yeah, fair enough. The only difference now is what I saw from them in that second half against West Ham. That was what encouraged me in terms of performance.
That's fair. Let's move on now to the mid-price midfielders.
All right, so we've got a few interesting midfielders in this bracket. A lot of questions as well, because I think people are looking to make transfers in this bracket. We've got the likes of Grealish, Zaha, we've got James Rodriguez, we've got Foden, who we've spoken about earlier. A lot of Podence owners are looking to drop him for the likes of Soucek. Tom mentioned he's interested in Bowen. What's your thought in this bracket? Who do you rate the most, Tom?
I think there's 3. I think James, Grealish, and Foden are the 3 standout picks at the moment. I think that Pulisic could kind of break into that 3, but we're going to need to see probably something a little bit more from him. I really like Jared Bowen, but not from this week, from next week. And then I think there's a couple of players, Ben Rama at West Ham, who obviously you're not going to put them in yet, but I think he's just good to be thinking about. And the Leicester midfielder, Under, who set up Vardy the other night, I think he looks really interesting. He's a good player. I did a bit of research on him from his time in Italy. And so those 2 are players which they're not options yet, but they could become options. But at the moment, I would say James, Grealish, and Foden are the 3 that I'd be looking at.
Zaha not convincing you, despite putting up great numbers? That was a case of him playing Fulham, you thought?
Yeah, I struggle with backing Crystal Palace going forward. I think he's, if he's on penalties, then he kind of elevates him a little bit. But I really struggle with trusting Palace. Especially after you saw them after that Brighton game where, 1 shot on goal and it was a penalty, and it's hard to beat. If the players like 5 million or 5.5, it's one thing, but when they're over 7, I'm struggling with Zaha a bit. I don't know. What do you guys think? Could you be tempted?
Zoph?
It's a difficult one because again you go back to looking at the past. In the past, Zaha has been a bit of a troll.
Sure.
Zaha has been a bit injury prone, but he's being played out of position this year. He's being played up top. And now I've got the table up here for expected goal involvement for midfielders, 8.0 and under for the last 4 game weeks. And Zaha is on top by a clear margin. He's 3.24. Then you have Grealish, who's second at 2.8, Rodriguez at 2.59, and Bowen at 2.23. So I do think there's a case to be made for Zaha, and I do think he might keep penalties when Milivojevic comes back, because I think maybe just it's a confidence thing. Maybe Hodgson wants to keep him happy. So I do think there is potential there, but I don't like the immediate fixtures. I think they have Wolves and Burnley and the next 2 right away. So maybe after that.
The fixtures are Wolves, Leeds, Burnley, Newcastle.
Yes, the next 3 aren't really great.
Yeah, fair enough. So you think just wait and watch, see how he plays out against these 3 difficult defenses, and then jump if you have to for him.
But I think if I had to buy one today, I'd probably go with Grealish.
I agree. I echo that sentiment. He just looks incredibly involved in the Aston Villa team, and they have the fixtures right until game week 15.
He was very unlucky not to get on the score sheet.
You'd pick him if you had to pick one now. You guys would pick a Grealish over a James as well.
That's a bit more dodgy. I don't think.
I don't think I would.
Yeah. I think I'd still have James. I assumed right now most people already have James, but I think James, if he's fit, there's no hamstring issue. I think he's probably the pick.
And what about the Podence owners? I mean, a lot of them are looking to switch with the, because the Wolves fixtures are changing as well. In the sort of 5.5 to 6.5 million bracket, who do you guys like?
I've spoken a lot about Podence previously. Tom, why don't you have a go?
I think he's a hold for this week. It must be frustrating for owners because he looks like he's always going to do something and it doesn't quite happen for him. He's a good little player though, I think. You don't want to be taking him out before this weekend because that's just got, a return written all over it. You'll take him out and, so hold him for one more week and then maybe make the switch to somebody like Bowen, who's in a similar kind of price point the following week when Bowen has Fulham at home. So that's what I'd be looking to do. And even Barkley, people said last week ago it's all Villa. Nobody's talking about Villa now, but I still think that Barkley around that kind of 5 to 6 million kind of price point, I still think he'll offer a bit of value. And if he suddenly pops up on penalties, then suddenly, everybody's talking about him.
I'm glad to hear that.
Which might happen.
Barkley or not.
So, yeah, I mean, it's all a bit up in the air with penalties up at the moment. But let's see if he does take them on, then that's going to be a massive boost to his appeal, isn't it? So.
Did you prefer? You mentioned you like Bowen. Do you prefer him as a pick to Foden right now?
Probably not. I put Foden a little bit ahead of him, but it depends. That's right now. Once West Ham's fixtures change next week, then I might change my mind slightly then. I just think Foden hasn't done a lot wrong so far, has he? He looks really dangerous. He's playing quite advanced. He's making loads of good runs into the box against West Ham at the weekend. And there's a lot of upside to him playing in that Man City side who are naturally just in time going to score a lot more goals than West Ham, you'd think. So.
Yeah. My thought with the West Ham midfielders is that I'm really waiting. I did an article for the Scout where I deep dive into the West Ham attackers, and I'm worried about that Antonio injury. If he's out for a couple of weeks, I feel like West Ham can't do what they've been doing so far because Antonio's the prime reason they're able to play. They're playing. Antonio's the reason why Bowen and Souček are good options because he makes a lot of runs in the channel, which leaves open a lot of space for these two to come into and attack. So I'm waiting to see if Antonio's fit or not. And if that is the case, in my opinion, he's a standout option. If I had to pick a West Ham attacker, I no doubt go towards Antonio. And that's one of the reasons why I don't quite like Bowen as a pick because in both are priced at 6.3 million. I'd rather go with the forward. That's my thinking at the moment.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess it'd be Haller who steps in for Antonio. Very different players, aren't they? So the dynamic will immediately change. So.
Who drops out from the West Ham attack when Ben Rama joins? Is it Fornals?
Yeah, but it'd be hard to drop him right now, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
Why fix something that ain't broke? I feel like Moyes might be tempted to play a more attacking formation because the fixture run is quite easy compared to what he has had so far. So I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, go back to 4. So I'd be worried about Masuaku, who might drop out because I feel like Cresswell is really important for them on set pieces. So I don't expect him to drop out. And Masuaku he's good as a wing back. I just don't rate him when playing in a 4. That's my worry.
Yeah, that's a really good point because I think a lot of people are going to be looking at their defence next week, and that's probably worth bearing in mind, isn't it?
Yep. Yep.
You've had Souček all season, also, haven't you, Tom?
Yeah. I'm still waiting for a goal. He got the assist, didn't he, a few weeks back from that deflection from his kind of header. It seems crazy just like I said, I've had other fires, but it seems crazy to take him out. So if I did go for Bowen, it would be a double up of some sort. But a lot depends on Hammers' fitness and where he's at, and then I'll make a decision after that. I do actually quite like Antonio though as well. Again, he might be, if he were to be fit, quite a simple switch from Jimenez to him next week. So
I noticed you mentioned Lookman in your differential article this week, and Zoph owns him as well. So I'm interested in knowing. Oh yeah, you were close to owning it. You're very close to. Instead. Yeah, if you had to pick one between Souček and Lookman, where would you guys go?
Souček for me.
I would. Yeah, just because I think West Ham look a better team than Fulham. But Lookman has looked pretty lively. If Fulham are going to put a run together, you're got to think that he's going to be central to it. So
he hit the post. twice.
Yeah.
This week looked pretty
Scored the week before and was the man of the match as well. And even I think he came on as a sub in the week before that, and he looked lively. So I think there's quite a bit to like about it, Lookman. But yeah, probably Susek just ahead of him at the moment.
Yeah, you'd like to think that his defense, he's sort of like a box-to-box midfielder, so his defensive workload would reduce as well, given the fixture run that he has, which makes him a very good pick. At 4.9, that's just a lot of value.
It's just about, and he's a seventh attacker, I think, at that with that fixture, and he's no longer an eighth attacker.
I agree.
Yeah, that's where he's been for me.
I'm interested to see whether Diogo Jota ends up playing a few more games. Might be a very, very interesting option in that budget as well. Just want to monitor. Don't jump in just yet. Give it a couple of more games and then.
Well, it depends. It depends what system they're going to play, doesn't it? I mean, it would have to be a 4-2-3-1 for him to probably get a run of starts. Yeah. I've heard that he's going to start tonight in Europe. In terms of the weekend, I think they'll probably use that 4-2-3-1 again, because I think they like playing it against teams who play 3 or 5 at the back, or whatever you want to call it. So that wouldn't surprise me if he plays again at the weekend. But it's going to be one of those. If you bring him in, you're just going to be looking at that. You're going to be getting nervy around that team sheet time every week, aren't you? So,
I also think Thiago's injury had maybe something to do with it, because he starts if he's fit. So
yeah,
definitely.
Any other names you guys fancy in the mid-price midfield bracket?
Nothing else. I think we have covered it.
No,
we can move on.
All right, let's talk about. Let's get into the teams, and the first team we're going to be talking about is
Chelsea.
Your team's offer. I mean, what is Lampard up to? I mean,
what was Maguire up to?
I don't know. The same thing Reece James was up to. If you notice what Maguire put up a post, Reece James did something similar at the other end as well. So I just thought Chelsea looked so lackluster. They had nothing to offer. I mean, whatever impetus there was in attack, everything came from United. And I wouldn't blame Lampard for setting up so differently. He is afraid of Solskjaer after what he did to him last season. I mean, 0.68 XG to 0.2 XG. I was reading a stat, it was quite interesting on the Scout, where Timo Werner and Kai Havertz, Chelsea's new 100 million toys, they had fewer touches combined than Cavani did in 32 minutes. What are your thoughts, Zoph?
I mean, let's just go back. I think what's happened is conceding 3 against Southampton really scared Lamps. So I saw that Sevilla game, and I noticed Sevilla game we had set up very much defensively in terms of our system. So now he's restricted the attack a little bit. So the problem is I don't think he's been able to find a balance yet. The back 3 stifles the attack. The 4-2-3-1 leaves the defense exposed. Now, the problem is that Southampton game, you can't really read too much into it, because very few teams are going to set up with that higher line against Chelsea. Now, Ziyech is likely to start. So in terms of buying, I can only recommend Chilwell right now. I really don't feel confident in any of the front 4 to say that they are a buy right now. Chilwell, I think, is probably the standout premium defender below the 6 million bracket. Timo, if you have to pick an attacker, it would probably be Timo. But I want to see how well he does against these deep blocks, which you're probably going to be facing next, Burnley and Sheffield. So that's where it is for me. Now, we've got the table up here in terms of XG for the last 2 weeks. I think Chelsea have the 4th, so that's the 7th worst XG in the league for the last 2. So I would wait before investing in the attack.
What are your thoughts there, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I think the worry is I'm not a fan of the club, as you know, but the worry is you look at Lampard in Chelsea, and I don't really know what the style of play is there. I think with Guardiola and Klopp in their first seasons, there was a lot of kind of ups and downs, but you got an idea of what they were trying to implement and what they were trying to do. And I think we're already into season 2 with Lampard, and I still don't know what that is. I mean, you spoke. They had those really odd results, didn't they? The 3-3s, and then it's like against Sevilla and United, they've kind of reined it in a little bit. He's not going to be able to do that for the next run of games, though, is he? I think the next run of games is going to give us a real idea of where they are at as a club and what they're going to offer going forward. It's they've still got so much firepower in there that still if you're an owner of a Werner or a Pulisic, I think it's a hold. But I think these next games are going to be really important for Lampard, because if they come out of them after a bad run, you kind of fear the worst for him a little bit, I think. Yeah.
Are you interested in their defense?
I like Chilwell. Yeah, I like Chilwell a lot. He's a possibility that I could bring him in this week. But yeah, I've kind of got my eye on West Ham next week as well for that defensive slot. So I'm a bit unsure at the moment. But yeah, Chilwell would be the pick. I mean, Zoph, what do you think about Zuma? And I've heard him talked about a little bit.
So the problem now with our backline is we are relying largely on a 36-year-old centre back to provide our defensive solidity.
Yeah.
Now, A, he's not going to start 3 games a week, and B, I think it's only a matter of when, not if he gets injured. So now once Thiago Silva does get injured, we're going to likely be playing Tomori alongside, or Christensen, who is a complete train wreck, or Rudiger, who's completely out of form. So that's a bit of a risk right now with investing in the Chelsea defense. Zuma is only as good as a partner next to him. Zuma is very raw. He needs a lot of hand-holding during games. He needs a senior partner, not somebody like Tomori next to him.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of managers are still holding Reece James. What's your advice to them? Do they hold, or is it a good time?
I'm going to sound like a broken record about Reece James, but I wouldn't ever carry a rotation risk in my team. I would sell.
The problem why people are getting tempted is because whenever he's played, he hasn't looked. Yeah. And he hasn't looked bad. He hasn't looked too bad, to be fair to him.
That's the thing. He's like the Kolarov. You get the one game out of him and you're like, oh my God, this guy's got a high ceiling. When he starts, he's going to get 15, 20 points. And that's how those players lure you in.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
My thoughts on that attack and defenses. I feel like Lampard isn't going to give the next 3 teams that he faces the respect that he did in the past 2 games. And he's, I think, finally going to unleash Hakim Ziyech, who's a really talented player as well. So when it comes to assets like Timo Werner, I mean, I don't feel like selling him at all. And there's a lot of talk about the fact that Werner is only suited to playing a high line and he can't play against a deep block. Now, my thinking is that when it comes to playing a deep block, the onus on Werner being a good asset also depends on the creativity around him. So if Lampard sets up in a way which gets the best out of his attackers, able to give enough service to Timo Werner, then I think Werner's got enough class. I mean, we saw his goals against Southampton to take advantage of that. So it's a hold for me. I might be in the market for a premium defender, so I'm looking at Chilwell closely as well. One other name also that I think is very interesting is Mendy at 5 million. I mean, we're getting a Chelsea keeper at that price. What are your thoughts there?
I think he's a good pick, but I think McCarthy is just as good at 4.5.
Tom, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I naturally I limit myself in terms of goalkeepers to 4.5s. That's where I kind of always look. And it's really interesting that you've got a starting Chelsea keeper for 5. It's, you'd expect him to be 5.5, wouldn't you? So it is interesting, but I'm not seeing enough from them defensively right at this moment in time to say he's 0.5 better off than McCarthy. Like Zoph said, that's my keeper at the moment, and I'm pretty happy with him. So.
Before we move on to the next session, I can't just let it go. I have to give Lampard's credit over Solskjaer. At least he's putting his 100 million on the pitch. They're not on the bench like Pogba and Van der Beek.
That's working for him. I mean, we created a lot. So, I mean, Lampard decided to have 3 at the back against Juan Mata and Daniel James. I mean, that's all that I have to say.
Juan Mata is a world-class player, mate.
I mean, just that's all I have to say. I mean, imagine if he started all of them.
Then you'd have probably lost. Let's move on now to Villa.
This is going to go on all season, I have a feeling.
I'm just going to sit back and watch.
You're up front now, Tom. We're talking about Villa.
Yeah. So obviously, bit of a setback on Friday. Thought Leeds were absolutely superb, and that completely overwhelmed us down the flanks. As soon as Schneich was taken off, I thought Shackleton came in and did really well for them, Klitsch as well. But it's a bit like Everton. It's one game, and it goes back to the Liverpool game when they lost to Villa. How much do you want to read into one game? I don't think we're going to be as good as maybe some people predicted before that game, but I don't think we're going to be the team who are fighting for relegation like last season. I think we'll be somewhere in the middle. And for the prices that our players are, I think that there's some definite value there. I think we recruited really well in the summer. I think the signings we made were really good. I think Martinez coming in is a massive upgrade over what we previously had, bearing in mind Heaton's been injured. I think Matty Cash has really surprised me. He's really kind of come in and adapted well to this kind of level. And Barkley and Watkins, they're going to be good picks, I think, for our run of fixtures from now right up until game week 15. I think it's just a case of just leaving it for now. I think all of those players will do well. I think that Douglas Luiz has improved. I think McGinn is getting back to his best levels. And I think McGinn benefits from all of the attention that Grealish and Barkley get over on that side. I think that naturally, if you're a team looking to kind of stop us in an attacking sense, that's going to be where your focus is in. And I think that could actually benefit McGinn going forward. I wouldn't pick him over a Barkley or Grealish, but I think it's helping him to kind of thrive. I do have a concern that teams can play through us too easily, which has been going on for a long time now. Going back to last season, I mean, even against Sheffield United, when they had 10 men, I still found them playing through us too easily. So I see us using more of a 4-3-3 than a 4-2-3-1 going forward, because I don't think the 4-2-3-1 will give us quite enough stability defensively. And that has a knock-on effect to Barkley, who will be deeper in a 4-3-3. But I think it's a case of a hold for now with those guys. Watkins I still really like as a pick, and Grealish we spoke about earlier.
Want to ask you exactly what I wanted to ask.
What was the question? Sorry, guys. No.
How would you rank the Villa assets in terms of the attack, first, second, third?
Grealish 1, Watkins 2, Barkley 3.
I was hoping Barkley would make it to second.
And what about the defense?
I like Watkins. The defense, it's pick. Martinez obviously good in the sticks. If you haven't got on board him now, he's rising in price though. So you might want to look at Target maybe, who I think you bought in, didn't you, Pranil? I think, I wouldn't say he's been at the top of his game this season, but I think naturally on that left side, he will be involved. And Konsa as well, if you want a bit of goal threat, came close against Leeds, had a good shot.
Which Barkley created.
Yeah.
So I mean, Barkley's going to tick out. I think Barkley's a good option. I just think that Grealish at the moment is he's kind of on a bit of another level.
Absolutely.
So
we've got the heat map up here also. Sorry, Tom. We got the heat map up here for Barkley and Grealish. I just wanted to mention that, and you can see Barkley is dropping a lot deeper, but Grealish is primarily in the attacking third.
Yeah, I think Grealish had to drop deeper when Horahan was taking up that kind of left-sided midfield position to help create. But now Barkley's there, I think it enables Grealish to play a bit higher up the pitch, to get into the penalty box more often. But it isn't just a straight pick between Grealish and Barkley, because you've got to consider what you're going to do with the money. There's a price difference, right? So I do think, and like I say, I keep going back to it, but penalties is going to be massive in this, isn't it? Because if Barkley suddenly gets penalties, then you might be thinking, I'm going to bank that kind of 1 million or whatever the price difference is between them, and go with him. But I think all three are good. I think the fixtures are there, and I think it's a case of just giving it a bit more time and seeing what happens.
If you had to pick one between Konsa and Target, which way would you lean?
Oh God, I keep getting the answer to this question, and I keep changing my mind. It's a really difficult one. I might go Target just because he's a bit cheaper now.
All right. Anything to add, Zoph, on Villa?
Nothing much. I think we can move on to only possibly just one thing. Maybe you guys play Arsenal away in a couple of weeks. How do you see that one going? Because I think that's probably the most difficult fixture of the next 4.
It is, but it's not a fixture you'd go into at the moment worrying about too much. I mean, Arsenal just look incredibly flat kind of going forward, don't they? So I mean, it's an unpredictable season. To be honest, I'm probably more worried about playing Southampton this weekend than Arsenal. But that kind of leads on to our next point, I guess.
Absolutely. Now we move on to Southampton.
Why don't you start us off with Southampton, Tom? What's your thinking there?
I like them a lot. I think their form since lockdown has been really, really good. I think if you look at a table, I saw it earlier on in the week, from lockdown up until now, I think they're probably top 5 or 6. They had a little dip at the start. They lose to Palace on the opening day, I think, and everybody was a bit down on Ings and Adams. But I think what's really important for Southampton is they look fit now. They look as though that fitness is coming back, and that is so important to the way that that team plays. And I think Ings, Adams. I mean, I've got a defensive double up with McCarthy and Walker-Peters, which I haven't utilised in the past couple of weeks. And I was looking at it last week thinking, how have I ended up with both of these guys in my squad? But it actually looks all right now after that clean sheet. And they play, I think, Newcastle the week after Villa. So that's probably a time when I'll stick them both in.
Defensively, they've conceded the least number of big chances in the last 4 game weeks.
Yeah.
In the entire
looking
league,
good.
So statistically doing good. Yep.
And Bertrand looks looks really good as well. It's just a shame he's 5 million. But I think the fitness is the key for them. They look as though they're kind of back in their groove now, and there's some good picks.
So my thinking with Southampton is, I mean, there are a few teams where you don't look at fixtures, when it comes to their attack. And Southampton, along with Leeds, are the 2 teams which strike to me as such teams where I feel like they can give any team a run for their money in terms of attack and score goals against them. So these are the 2 teams, there's a lot of talk about form versus fixtures. These 2 teams, I wouldn't pay much attention to fixtures because I'd back them against anyone. And what I've noticed is Adams is matching Ings for the stats so far this season.
Well, we thought he might. It was all about minutes with Adams, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So, and he's getting those. So,
The price difference is pretty considerable. My thinking is, though, just because the quality of the player and the class that Ings has, he'll earn that price over Adams. Yeah, and penalties as well. So he'll earn that price.
Yeah.
We've overlooked Ings, I think, this season. Not very highly owned, but just seems like he's carried off from last season.
Saints attacking numbers are a bit weird also. They score so many goals, but I'll just share some statistics here. So on the last 4 game weeks, they are ranked 11th for shots in the box with 30, 16th for big chances with 4, but they've scored the 6th highest number of goals. So they're not really a team you can read too much into the stats.
Yep. I wouldn't worry about those numbers too much because whatever we've have seen of them, they've looked pretty good.
But I was just saying this is a case where you can't really, if you look purely at the stats, you'd say that they're not creating much, they're not scoring much, but that's not the case.
Yep. And also I'm guessing with the likes of Ings, he's a statistical anomaly given his quality of finishing. So that might come into play as well.
Definitely does.
Yeah, I think he's on my watch list. Yeah, I'd definitely consider him.
All right, let's move on to the
fixtures.
All right, I'll just talk about each game, and you guys can add your thoughts in terms of how you all see that game panning out, as well as captaincy. Let's start with Sheffield versus Man City. How do you see that game going, Tom?
Man City win. I mean, I don't think it'll be too heavier win. I think but I can see it 2-0, something like that, 2-0 or 3-0. I think Sheffield United give up. I don't think any other side in the league has given up as many chances as they have down their right flank. So I think you talking about Sterling, if he is positioned to that side, or whether or not it's Cancelo or Foden, I think they're all good options this week. I mean, I don't know whether I'd captain them over a Salah or a Kane, but I think they're great options to have. So.
Yep, they were a little bit better against Liverpool than they have been previously in the season. But my thinking with regards to maybe getting tempted to captain Sterling is I feel like this is the game where it all comes together because it hasn't so far. And De Bruyne coming back just gives me a lot more confidence in terms of going for something like that. It's nothing but a gut feeling, and I don't like backing against my instinct. I'll be watching their game midweek pretty closely.
Well, I was going to say, at least you get to see them and kind of they can audition for it then, I suppose. So.
Yeah. I won't be surprised if they win by 3 goals. Just got a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
I'm never going to not say City are going to score 3 goals. Okay.
All right, Liverpool versus West Ham. How do you guys? I mean, West Ham look a decent proposition in defense these days. So how do you see that game?
So the defensive numbers are really good for West Ham. Over the last 4 game weeks, they've conceded just 18 shots in the box. That's the second fewest. The 5 big chances they conceded has been the 4th fewest. So it's not an easy game. At the previous years, you look at Liverpool versus West Ham as a banker. I don't think that's the case anymore. But this is David Moyes' bogey ground. I don't think David Moyes has won at Anfield in ages. So how do you guys see this panning out? Tom?
Yeah.
Sorry, Ella, you can go first.
I think Liverpool have too much for West Ham. That said, I won't be surprised to see Liverpool conceding. to that West Ham attack, especially if Antonio's fit. I think the fitness of Antonio is really important in terms of how this game is going to go. But I'd say something like a 2-1 or a 3-1 to Liverpool.
Yeah, I think, comfortable win for Liverpool. I think, 2 or 3 goals. I think Thiago coming back will be massive for them. And I think if they play that 4-2-3-1 and Thiago's fit, I think that will help them have a bit more control in that game as well. I'm a Trent owner. I think you guys both own him, right? So it's not the week to get rid. Just give him another week, I think, and then reanalyze it after that once the fixtures get a little bit trickier.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I'm looking to upgrade Jimenez to Kane this week, and it looks like
he could be the guy.
He could be the guy that's going there. My problem with Trent, it's good that you mentioned that, is just that he's sort of jogging around and hobbling around like Pogba does normally for United, where he was used to sprinting last season. He just doesn't look the same player this season. So I don't really know if it's just tactics. He just doesn't look the same player. That's my worry.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? But, for me, it's a hold for this week and then reanalyze it after that, I think. But there's a lot of money tied up there, so he's the obvious guy if you want to upgrade in other areas to drop.
So you guys think this is a good captain fixture for Salah or Mane?
Yeah, it is definitely. As safe as it gets.
Yeah, I was close to bringing in Mane last. If James would have been out, Mane was my transfer in because I had 4 million in the bank, and seeing what happened at the weekend, it would have been a good move. But I think if you own either of them, they're definitely good choices this week.
Move on to the next fixture: Spurs against Brighton.
So if you had some stats on them, why don't you tell us?
Okay, so Brighton's stats, again, they're very weird. They've conceded the fewest shots in the box over the last 4, that's 16, but they've conceded 9, with only Liverpool conceding more, that's 11. So they've conceded 7 big chances, only 6 teams have conceded more. So, and Spurs, on the other hand, they're top of all the attacking stats: goals 11, big chances 15, and shots on target. And only Leeds and Liverpool, 53 and 47, have taken more shots in the box than their 44. So on paper, you would say the Spurs attack is on fire, but Brighton's stats, this was the case even during the lockdown. I remember they have great defensive stats, but they concede goals. What do you guys make of this?
So I feel like this game is actually very well suited for Spurs, because Brighton like to keep possession and Spurs like to concede possession and play on the counter. And I feel like this game will suit Son especially. I've gone without Kane and Son so far, but this is the game I'm worried about, because I feel like there'll be spaces for Kane and Son to take advantage of.
Because Brighton like to play, right? They're not like West Ham. West Ham are probably going to strike the bus. Brighton will want to play.
Exactly. Spurs are more suited to play a team like Brighton than they are to play a team like Burnley, which we saw last game. So I'm worried about this game, and I'm looking to get in one of the Spurs attackers at least.
Tom,
I completely agree with what you said. I think it's a good game for Spurs. I think they look more clinical right now than they have done in previous seasons. I think really good setup for Son this week. I think he could do really well. I think that, Spurs looked last night. They looked as though they were kind of a bit more holding back a little bit more, I suppose. But I think that is the type of opponent that they were playing that was going to make it difficult for them. And I think we'll see a comfortable win for Spurs at the weekend, and a good game for Son and Kane. So.
Agree. Now the next one, Burnley-Chelsea. I'm not looking forward to this one. Burnley is the equivalent of a cold Tuesday night in Stoke, and I don't think our new German boys, our Moroccan boy, is going to have a very good time of it.
How do you see it going if you had to call a scoreline?
Maybe 1-0 Chelsea, 2-1 Chelsea, but I don't see there being more than 3 goals in this game in total.
Tom, do you agree?
Yeah, narrow win for Chelsea, I think. Burnley have actually been putting up some pretty good defensive numbers this season. They conceded 4 against Leicester, I think, but it was... I don't think it was... they were a bit unlucky. And then they conceded 3 against Newcastle on an off day. But generally, they've been pretty good. But I think Chelsea, they've got such quality going forward in those players that all it takes is a few seconds for it to click. And they, we're not talking about Liverpool 2019-20 defence here. It is still Burnley, and Chelsea should be able to find a way through, which is why I quite like Pulisic this week. But it will be tough.
I feel like they have enough creativity in there. So it's just about whether they're going to click or not. I feel like, again, they're more suited to play a Burnley than a Spurs, for example, because there's just more creativity and quality in that team. So if Lampard doesn't screw up his selection, I'd see a win by 2 goals for sure.
Let's hope for
Do you
another
think
Pulisic hat-trick.
do you think they go back to do you think they go back to a 4 then for this, like 4 at the back, or
yeah, I do.
Definitely. Next one, your boys, Tom. Villa, Southampton.
5-0 Villa. Nah, it's a hard one to call this. I'm wary of this one. I think like we've been talking about it, Southampton are a very good team. I see them scoring. I think after having Bamford and Ayling in my team on Friday night and all of the Villa fans turning against me, I need to say a Villa win, but I'm not very confident about it, So, I mean, it's going to be a really tough, maybe a 1-1, something like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm calling. I think it's going to be a score draw. I think it's going to be a really difficult game for Villa. I think Southampton are just, if I had to call a favourite, I feel like Southampton are just playing a little better football compared to Villa at the moment. So either a score draw or a 2-1 to Saints for me.
So I think it could be a bit better than I think Southampton play a little bit similar to Liverpool in terms of the high line. So I'm interested to see how offensive Villa go after losing the last game. Do they go as aggressive as they did against Liverpool to try to break the high line with the runners, or do they set up in a more conservative shape? I think that's what it'll come down to.
I think they'll go a bit more. I think Barkley will be a bit higher up. At least he'll start. He started higher up against Leicester, but then we found ourselves overrunning midfield, and Smith went man for man and went back to a 4-3-3. So he withdraws, and then McGinn has a little bit more freedom to get forward. Against Southampton, because they'll probably play a 4-4-2, I can see Barkley starting a little bit higher, which is good news for his owners if it were to happen.
Zoph is one of them. He's smiling right now, I'm sure.
Right, guys, that was fun. Let's move on now quickly, just because the differentials you guys have picked out. LR has gone for Cancelo. Why have you gone for him, LR?
His stats last game week look pretty encouraging. 2 shots, 2 chances created. He started the last 2 games in the league and started the last 8 games he's available for. So I fancy him at 5.4.
I've gone for Lookman. I think this is Fulham's possibly biggest fixture of the season. I don't think they get more of 6-pointers than this. Now, Lookman's had 9 shots over the last 2 game week. Only Salah has had more amongst midfielders with 10.
But West Brom actually just mentioned they've tightened up a fair bit once Ivanovic has made such a huge difference.
He's the Colossus, the god.
I want to know what happens because, I mean, West Brom did play 2 all-right opponents as well. So I wouldn't look into those defensive stats. But yeah, interesting pick, Lookman. Who have you gone with, Tom?
I went with Pulisic, actually. I'm still amazed that he hasn't returned yet, but I think his ownership is about just under 4%. And I just think he's such a good player. Like, I love watching Pulisic play. It's just a matter of time before he hauls. And when he hauls, there's a good chance it's going to be a brace, I think. And I think Burnley have looked better defensively, but I still think that they can be got at down the flanks. And if you look at the last couple of games, I think Pulisic leads the way for shots for Chelsea. Shots in the box, I think he's joint first. So I think it's a matter of time before we're all looking at Pulisic and thinking, how can we get him into our team? So,
nice fixture run as well, because I like getting a player at the start of a fixture run, and that's
definitely
what happens with Chelsea this game.
I hope you win this battle, Tom.
Yeah, no, he's a good option, I think. So.
Right, let's move on now to some stats that Bakar has sent in for us. So I'll read you guys through the first stat. So this is about Grealish versus Barkley. Here he runs a comparison over Grealish versus Barkley for the past 2 game weeks, which is pertinent to highlight the impact of the slightly deeper role Barkley has adopted since Hourihane has been dropped. So this is for the last 2 game weeks. Shots in the box is 2 for Grealish, 1 for Barkley. Big chances, 2 for Grealish, none for Barkley. Big chances created, 1 each. Penalty area touches. Now this is a big difference. 18 versus 5. That's 18 for Grealish, 5 for Barkley. As you can see, Grealish is equaling or bettering Barkley in every stat. And looking at the previous 2 fixtures, Grealish has been far more advanced than Barkley ever since Hourihane has been dropped. Do you agree with this, Tom? These observations here?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it completely comes down to the system. against Liverpool, Barkley Horahan wasn't involved in that. Barkley came straight in for him and played in that 10 role. And if he's playing there, he's naturally going to be more advanced. But if it goes back to that 4-3-3, he's naturally going to be a bit deeper. He's going to be recycling possession a bit more, and it benefits Grealish. But Grealish does seem to, now he's got Barkley next to him, he does seem to be getting in the box more. And I think, I just think he's a really good option.
Allow me to walk through the next one.
In his next stat, Bakar talks to us about Chilwell, which I find quite interesting because I'm looking at downgrading Trent to Chilwell. Now, this is what Bakar says. Since Chilwell's first appearance for Chelsea, he ranks second only to Robertson for touches in the final third, 99 to 117. He also ranks top for creating chances, 9 amongst defenders during this period. Chelsea are also the best for big chances conceded over the past 3 game weeks, and with the return of fitness of Edward Mendy in goal, Chelsea's defense looks much more assured all of a sudden. The Blues have a favourable run of fixtures, Burnley, Sheffield United and Newcastle, over the short term, and given Chilwell's potential to deliver points at both ends of the field, chances are that he will do well. I like that stat, Bakar. Thank you. Almost convinced me to go there now.
The third one relates to the Wolves attack, specifically Raul Jimenez. Now, after the 1-1 draw with Newcastle, Wolves are now second worst for big chances and second worst for XG over the past 2 game weeks. During this spell, Raul Jimenez has had just the 2 shots inside the box and no big chances, yet has scored twice. Fair to say he's worth keeping for Palace at home, but over the long term, given the lack of goal threat from Wolves, you will find better option in terms of value out there. I think Bakar, he's not getting much studying done, is he?
Yeah, no. Every time he's posting these on Twitter, I'm having a go at him, just a bit of banter.
I'll just quickly move on to discuss our teams. You go first, Ella, and please walk us through for the purpose of our audio listeners.
All right, so I'll just take you guys quickly through my team. I have 2 free transfers and no money in the bank. I have Martinez as my keeper. I have Trent, Semedo, Target. In my midfield, I have Salah, Sterling, Foden, and Podence. And in attack, I have Werner, Jimenez, and Calvert-Lewin. And now, what I'm thinking of doing is, I actually think Palace is a really, really good defense. So it's going to be a really difficult fixture for Wolves. So I think this is and I'm really worried about that Spurs versus West Brom game. So I think this is the time I jump onto Harry Kane. I'm looking to upgrade Jimenez to Kane, and I'm going to fund it by a defensive downgrade for Trent. This is where I'm leaning towards. Let's see where I'm at on Friday.
Mm-hmm. And Tom, you're up next.
Just Pranil, your team looks good for this week, I think, doesn't it? So look pretty well set.
That's what I keep saying every week. I mean, every week I'm accumulating 2 free transfers. I just played a wildcard and not taken any hits. Very unlike me this season. But I feel like this is the time to turn. I'm not willing to lose Sterling because I've got a good feeling about him this weekend.
Going on to my team, I've got 1 free transfer. I've got 2.9 million in the bank. I think if you look at the team, an obvious move is to make a defensive transfer this week and get rid of Vinagre and possibly go up to Chilwell and then bring him into the starting 11 for Justin. Part of me is thinking I might hold though and go into the following week with 2 free transfers, give me a bit more flexibility then to move Jimenez on and make another change. But again, I think it might come down to James' fitness. If he's out, then might need to be looking at making a change there. But fairly happy with this week, and having Salah, Son and Kane in there makes me a bit more confident.
If James is out, who are you looking at? Grealish?
This is the thing with it. I would rather look at maybe Bowen the week after. So that's why I'm watching Villa. I find is hard enough without having players invested in your FPL team. So that's why I'm kind of straying away from it. I think James is going to be all right. I'd be surprised if he doesn't make it at the moment. So in an ideal world, I might hold, but I might make that Vinagre change to Chilwell dependent. The thing is with the defence is last week I looked at my defence and McCarthy had Everton. Ayling went to Villa and Justin went to Arsenal. I was looking at that thinking, I'm really going to struggle with this. And I came out with 3 clean sheets from it. So it's unpredictable at the back, and maybe just leaving it at the moment is the best route to take.
Well, what's interesting is that if you're looking to get a defender in the 5.5-ish bracket, both of us are looking at Chilwell over Cancelo at the moment. We're just not convinced in terms of nailed-onness.
That's it. Yeah. So we'll see. But fairly happy with the setup right now. No plans for a wild card imminently or anything like that.
Yeah, I think we're in good shape. I don't need to wildcard anytime soon. But if James is fit, I would probably be saving to. I think you can make better moves next week with 2 free transfers. So moving on to my team, I've got McCarthy in gold, Alexander-Arnold, Walker-Peters, and Ayling. So it's a double up on the Southampton defense away to Villa. Salah captain, Son, Barkley, James Rodriguez in midfield, Jimenez, Calvert-Lewin, and Kane. So I'm probably looking to roll a transfer this week and get some West Ham players in next week.
All right. And just for the Bakar's fans, his team is right now Martinez, Saiz, Skillman, Trent in defense. He's looking to save. He's got in his midfield, he's got Son, Sterling, Podence, and Salah. He's got the armband on Salah at the moment. And in his attack, he's got Watkins, Werner, and Dominic Calvert-Lewin. All right. We'll quickly move on to the questions now. And I'll be addressing you guys. First question's for Tom from FPL Rossoneri. What is the optimal forward line for the next 3 to 5 game weeks, given that there are so many inform attackers and there isn't a template anymore?
If I was to look, just looking at the next 3 to 5 game weeks, it would be Kane, Antonio if he's fit, and I would be tempted to go Ings as well. Calvert-Lewin or Ings, maybe.
All right. Not tempted to put Bamford in there. Fixture play.
He wants them all to himself.
Yeah. Back off, guys. I think when the fixtures fall a bit kinder, I think he's going to be a really good option. If we're just looking at the next 3 to 5, though, I think I'd prefer Antonio over him as my cheaper option.
All right. Next question is for Zoph. It's from FPL Jeb. Did we miss the boat on Kane? His good fixtures are running out, or do fixtures not matter anymore?
I think Jose is playing coy and he's not bigging this up, but I think Jose fancies a run at the title this season. I think we could have possibly the most open title race in years. Now you have Liverpool with Van Dijk injured, Man City not really as much in form. This is Jose's second season, so I think now it's a matter of form, isn't it? Now Jose, I always back Jose in the big games. I don't really look at, let's say, Spurs playing Man City is as difficult a fixture with Jose in charge. And I think with the current form that Kane and Son are in, they can get these goals against anyone. I mean, the fixtures, the 3 tough fixtures that people are talking about are Man City, Chelsea, and Arsenal. So Chelsea, I know, we look a bit tighter, but we're not really tighter. Man City can concede goals. And Arsenal for Kane is like pretty much West Brom. So I would hold on to Kane for those.
All right. Next question is something I'll take on. It's from Redmond Shire. Is it finally time to replace Liverpool fullbacks with a Manchester City, Manchester United, or a Chelsea defender? Save the money in defense and invest in attack. I'm thinking of doing that this week. I'm thinking of removing Trent from my team. But I'd be more inclined towards removing Trent rather than Robertson. I don't think Robertson is a problem. He's looking like a class act this season. And I expect him to continue getting returns in attack as well. And Chelsea go on a good run. We already spoke about Cancelo as well. So if you're getting a substantial upgrade in your attack, then do it. If not, hold on, like Tom said. Next question's for Tom. It's from FPL_NJ. Best replacements for Dean. Is Kyle Walker viable or too much of a rotation risk going forward? Wolves fixtures turn for the worse, so don't want to go there. Leicester defenders rotate well for me, but so many injuries. Any advice for NJ, Tom?
I think I wouldn't go to Walker. I think if you want a reliable guy at the back for City, you'd probably go with Diaz. If you want to roll the dice a little bit more like we were thinking of, maybe Cancelo, I'd put them a bit ahead of Walker, I think. Best replacement, I think we've probably spoken about him, Chilwell, or if you can afford to leave it a week, I'd probably be looking at the West Ham defence. So I'd originally thought Masuaku, but Pranil, you've got me to consider thinking about that now, thinking, is his role in that team quite secure? So you might want to look at the right back, Kufal, who has just come in, who probably has got a bit more security around him at the moment. So yeah, probably Chilwell or one of the West Ham guys if you can afford to wait a week.
All right. Next question is from Wadi Boys. I'll take this one on. What to do with Wolves assets, and is it time to jump on the West Ham assets? I think if you time this correctly, next week looks ideal because Wolves have Crystal Palace this week and West Ham have Liverpool. After that, the fixture shift is perfect, so I don't see any problems with making that change. Next question is for Tom. It's from Leprof. @FT_Ankin. Are premium players worth keeping in your team if you're not going to captain them over an extended run of fixtures?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends what kind of captain strategy you go. I'm captaining Salah loads of the time at the moment, but I still want a Kane in there. I wouldn't pack your team full of heavy hitters because it's going to imbalance the team. But I certainly think that you can afford to get, 2 in. And then have players like Son to kind of complement them, your 9.5 kind of bracket. So yeah, I mean, I haven't captained Kane and I've bought him in, and I think he's fine to be there. So,
do you agree with this, Zoph?
I totally agree, because just because you're not going to captain someone, in fact, I would like to have somebody like Kane in my team if everybody else is going to captain them, because it at least gives you that insurance
security
of getting half his points.
Yeah. One of my favorite strategies is doubling up on premium attackers from a single team when they're having a good run. I concur with you guys. All right, the next question is for both of y'all as well. It's from FPL Memes. He still has a wildcard intact and doesn't plan to use it anytime soon. So have you guys thought of a good time to use it? Both of you all have it. So I thought I'd ask you guys.
Tom, what do you think?
As late as possible is normally my strategy. And this year, I think you can play at game week 16, and there's a talk of a double game week in game week 19. I will leave it to people more intelligent than me to speculate on why that is and how that's going to work. But yeah, that seems like a good idea at the moment. I don't really feel any need to play it now. So I think just holding it, having it in your back pocket is a bit of insurance. But yeah, the rough plan in my mind is 16.
That's what I've written down as well, as late as possible. And also when I feel the league has settled down a little bit. I still don't feel the league has settled. This weekend sort of felt a return to normalcy. We saw a lot of Mark Lawrenson scorelines, no matches over 3 goals. So maybe in a few weeks when things settle down, I might go before 16, but I need to feel confident in that the players I have this week won't be bad picks the week after.
If City show some form, Game Week 10 might be
because those 3-4 weeks that can really catapult you up the rankings.
Exactly. All right, so how much time do we have? Are we good for more questions?
Yeah, we can finish up. We have some time, no problem.
All right, the next question is from FPL Buna. Big congratulations to him. He just got engaged. He's asking, I think we're seeing this season is a lot of transfer decisions paying off in later game weeks and not immediately. The season is not like any other. So my question is this the year to be patient with our teams and make sensible transfer decisions? Buna, you always make sensible transfer decisions. I mean, I don't know what that meant, but I feel like you need to be patient until the time you're confident in terms of the trends you've spotted. So if you think you've spotted a trend, even if everybody's not talking about it, make the change. Otherwise, be patient. All right, next question is for Zoph. It's from Sports Totality. Is it safer to avoid doubling up on teams as much as possible based on how varied the outcome of matches have been this season in order to have the options more spread out as a strategy for tackling the variance? Nice question.
I mean, and for me, it depends on the team. Now, take Spurs, for example. Son and Kane double up is working wonders. So I loved how Son, even after scoring, he turned around to ask Kane, did you get the assist? I absolutely love that. So even if not from a fantasy aspect, it shows that they want to create and contribute towards goals for each other. So you need to have confidence in the team you're investing in. So a lot of us went early on Wolves and City, not based on what we have seen necessarily this year. We went on it based on what has happened on previous years, and ultimately that didn't pay off. But I don't think you shouldn't double in just because the case of not doubling. Ultimately, if you find a good basket, there's nothing wrong with putting more eggs in it. Otherwise, you're just wasting baskets.
Nice one. I like that. All right, next question is from Aman @AB_sports. First questions for me. You chase form of fixtures. This season, especially, we are seeing that players in form like Ings, Bamford, Kane, etc. are fixture proof and scoring against tough teams. Aman, my answer to this is it's very subjective. Like I mentioned, for teams like Leeds and Southampton, fixtures don't really matter because I back them to score against everyone. Zoph already mentioned that Mourinho likes playing against the stronger teams because it suits his counter-attacking style. But for teams like Aston Villa, I'd look at fixtures as well. So it's subjective and you need to take that into context. Next question is for Tom from Aman. This season, should we stick to 5 to 5.5 million defenders and use the money up front? Tom, what's your thinking there?
I think you can. I feel like this. I still like having the security of a Liverpool defender at the moment. I can completely see why that people are moving away from that. But for me, I still think they're going to come good. I like having that premium spot in my defence. But certainly no problem if you want to move away from that for a little bit and then see how they get on with the lack of Van Dijk, and then kind of reanalyze that in a few weeks.
All right. Next question is for Zoph. It's from @Saint Mindward. Do you see more value in the mids or forwards as of now? Are you more inclined to stack your mid with 5 good options or roll with 3 good strikers?
I mean, this year in particular, barring Kane, I think is the year of the value forward. I mean, FPL, I think, realized last year there was very little investment in the forward line. So they underpriced a lot of forwards this year. So I think that at 5.5 to 7.5, the forwards have much more potential than the midfield counterparts. So I'll personally be going with 3-4-3 this season rather than 3-5-2.
All right. Yeah, I agree. I've always been a 3-4-3 guy. Next question is for Tom. It's from @FPL Mikey. How do you I thought it's a really good question. How do you differentiate between being patient with an underperforming asset, example Trent, or versus deciding to drop? And the bonus question is Bamford for real or a future troll?
Okay. So going with the underperforming asset, I think then you start to look at fixtures and things like that. And, Trent is underperforming, but you see as a home game against West Ham this week, I don't think now's the time to kind of move him on. I think next week kind of makes more sense. So I think fixtures become really important with that kind of player and in that situation. And with Bamford, I think he probably sits somewhere, between the two. I think for 5.5 million, I think he's going to be just fine. I expect him to score 12, 13 goals maybe this season, and for 5.5 million, that's going to offer real value. So I don't think he's a troll, but I don't think he's going to be a world beater. I think it will be somewhere in between, which is great. So
he won't play Villa every week.
Very true.
Zoph are not taking any prisoners. All right. The next question is last one for the day is from Darpan Malkan. Can you take us through the journey of some of your great FPL seasons? Did you ever come back from difficult situations? What kind of a gap can optimistically be covered? This will help people like him who are beginners. I thought I'd offer a bit of optimism to Darpan. The season I finished 77th. At this point, I was sitting at around 1.2 million, and halfway through the season, I was sitting at 200K. I feel like, especially this season, given the amount of options we have and the amount of big hitters we have, I'd be confident to cover up a 50-60 point gap in the matter of 5 game weeks. You just need to have a couple of differential captaincies go your way against your opponent, and you're in the business. Any words of optimism for him, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's really early days. It's been a crazy season where we've had 6 game weeks. There's, 100-point leads can be cut in a matter of weeks. It's, it's just getting started. You've got to be optimistic at this stage.
All right. And that's it. That wraps up our pod for this game week. Thank you so much, Tom, for being with us. It's been absolutely wonderful listening to all the knowledge that you have, and it definitely shows that you put in, I think that stood out, that you put in all the hard work in terms of research that you do. That work pays off, and that shows in your rank. So thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. The podcast has been a great addition to the kind of the FPL scene, and it's been great just stepping in for the big man for a week. So, but no, well done to you all. So.
All right, and to our listeners, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and share on Twitter as well. And we'll see you next week. Goodbye from me.
Goodbye.